The ModernJeeper Show, the show about Jeeps, Jeeping, and Jeepers.
Well, hey, Modern Jeepers, this is another episode of the Modern Jeeper Show with me, Matson from Metal Cloak, and Mr. Modern Jeeper, Corey Osborne.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, where's Jessy?
She had to make a quick trip to Oklahoma, grandbaby time. We had a little window of good weather. Actually, she's gonna catch a bunch of weather down in Oklahoma. They're supposed to have hail and snow and then Denver, the Front Range, is supposed to have 10 inches of snow. So she ran down there to see the grandbaby before we head to Death Valley. So we had a little bit of a break, and I'm like, yeah, if you don't go now, you're not going to get to go. So,
speaking of weather, what's the weather going to be like in Death Valley?
That's a really good question. It's for our prior spring trips. We've had some cold nights, and I think the coldest we ever had was I think that was last year, and we had a night that was about 28 degrees. That was extremely cold, and we were up pretty high. But I hope this year is a little bit nicer. The second trip will be more up into the mountains rather than the first trip. First trip will be down in the flats, so the first trip should be fairly mild. I'm going to guess high 60s, low 70s would be my hope.
Well, and it's like layering, right? I mean, everything you do when you're overlanding, you layer your vehicle with equipment, and you layer yourself with clothes, because you just never know. Super cold at night, and
we're in full blown packing mode, trying to, this whole overlander thought process. It's a challenge, and there's still a lot of things out there that are not available. Manufacturers are still having problems getting stuff to us. I like to be organized, and it turns out whatever I need, no matter what it is always in the hardest location for me to get to on the Gladiator. So I'm trying to do things better, and I don't know that I'm succeeding, but I tried to get rid of the plastic bins, and thinking, okay, I'm going to do something really, really nice and get one of the aluminum boxes. Well, yeah, good luck, because all those aluminum boxes are made somewhere else. And I've canceled 2 orders now for those.
Somewhere else, is that a euphemism for made in China?
Yeah, I think actually the Zarges boxes, the Zarges, those are actually, I think, made in Germany or Australia.
German engineering.
Yeah.
Nice. That's
rubber. Turns out Rubbermaid works really well.
You think German engineering, and I'm thinking, I was just having a conversation. Have you ever heard of the Ford V4?
No.
It was a V4. It was actually a German-built Ford engine that they used in little sedans and stuff for a long time. In fact, it was probably the little sedan that, I couldn't even tell you the model of it, but I just popped up yesterday talking about it because I had a friend in high school whose sister had this little sports car, and I'm like, hey, what engine does it have? And he goes, he's a V4. Now, I worked in a service station. I was somewhat mechanically inclined. I'd asked him 5 times, a what?
A what?
A V4. A what? A V4. A V, like a V8. It's a V4. It's a half. Okay.
I just cut the block in half. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was a Ford, but it was made in Germany. So I don't know why my mind went there, but you guys in the Modern Jeepers, that's where my mind goes. It goes wherever it goes, and that's what the show's all about.
Well, and Stellantis is still talking about, there's more information now about this whole Tornado, I think is what they've codenamed this engine. And it's
the straight six?
A twin turbo straight 6.
Dude, and they're saying that's the funny thing about the articles is that this is the replacement.
Right.
For the 392.
Right. Like higher numbers.
Yeah. Out of a straight 6. So you can have all the great torque out of a straight 6, right?
Yep.
But with the twin turbo on it, our upcoming guest may have some information on this because he's an insider. We're insiders, but we're kind of outside insiders.
He's one of those motor guys too.
He's a gearhead motor guy. He's and like I said, we're outsider. I'm such an outsider and such an insider that nobody actually likes me outside of being inside. Whatever, if that makes sense. I don't know. You either love me or you hate me. It's okay. Corey, on the other hand, that's why he's Mr. Modern Jeepers, because everybody loves Corey.
Hey, oh yeah, everybody. I mean, it's crazy. It's been interesting being home and not having the last couple weeks and having this little break. But it turns out it's amazing at how much time very simple projects can take to get done. I mean, we're still working on getting the Line-X repaired on the CTI trailer. And shout out to Raceline. The trailer will have a little bit of a new look this year. Hopefully, I mean, I've got some, and our guest may have some information too. I found a generator. I actually have called 3 Honda generator shops that that's what their business is, and they have no generators.
Hey, how do you survive in a world where you simply can't get product?
So you get people that come in every day. Hey,
right?
Yeah, us too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've just listened to a podcast about Tim Leatherman, the founder of the Leatherman Tool Company. Right, one of these classic stories of 7 years. From like 1980, from the mid 70s, like 1983, designing his prototypes, not working. Every day, he was fortunate enough his wife was working. Every day he'd go into his shop and work on his next prototype. 7 years. But, he wholly owns the company. It's him and a partner. But the idea of something like that, and he made sure they have a few components that are overseas, but most of their stuff is manufactured up there in Portland with some other suppliers around the U.S. And so he's never had that problem of inventory issues. And in fact, the same thing happened to him. They had their best year ever in 2021. And over, 20 million tools sold or something like that. Wow. Low nine figures in revenue selling tools. So, but companies like that have actually focused and said, we want to do certain things a certain way. We want to build for ourselves. We want to build, we want to employ people here. That was part of his thing. He wanted to employ people for the long term at his company. He didn't want to just have it all overseas done or all drawn in, right? And that was part of his drive. It wasn't just to make a company. It wasn't just to sell a product. It was to actually employ people and help people.
Wow. I mean, I guess that's a similar philosophy to even what Metal Cloak has done, and our friends. I had Jeanette and folks here this last weekend here at the house, and showing me some of their products and they make, as Jim would put it, it's jewelry for your Jeep. And,
jewelry for your Jeep. Wow.
Yeah, and she, Susan, who is the owner of that company, runs that company, they have a similar view. Is they really just want to make a really good product and employ people, and there's not a whole lot of people involved in that company, and they make some really neat stuff, but they're not interested in, let me see if I can get a bunch of these parts from China sent over and that kind of that you're involved with.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And when you do it that way, you also have a better opportunity to make changes and improvements, right?
That's right.
We have the RockSport shock. Everybody knows the RockSport shock is an imported shock. That's fine. It's manufactured overseas. The 6-pack shock is made right here, in our own facility. The 6-pack shock we can iterate with. We can change. We can update. We can make it better, right? As we get new things. Stretching your ribs.
Yeah, I was just showing off my shirt.
Right. Oh, yeah, the 6-pack. That's it. So the 6-pack shocks, the RockSports are not. So the iterations of the RockSports, and we go, hey, we just found an improvement, right? It takes longer to make that improvement. The more you control the manufacturing, the better you can make products for people to be improved as you get feedback from people to make them better and better and better. And when we first started, most of our stuff was done by other shops in our region. So we had to order larger quantities, right? Now that we're doing most of our stuff in-house, it makes it easier for us because we can iterate changes on the fly, right? We can make a quick change on something, improve a fixture, improve a way of something's gone together, improve a method of doing it. And the more control you have, the better it is, I think, long-term for the customer and customer value and quality of product.
Well, and that's where, and our guest is an example example of being able to fabricate and make your own things and be creative and be skilled and talented enough to really bring it all together and make what you need on your own. That's crazy.
Yeah, well, that's being skilled and talented. But before we introduce him, I do want to talk about one thing, and for everybody out there, this is we're in the midst of it. It started at the beginning of this month, is the Ultimate RockLander Giveaway. Now, you're going to hear us use this term RockLander more and more and more, and RockLander and RockLanding. In fact, Jim and Deb of DMOS, their rig is RockLander, I think is the name of the rig. But we've fully embraced this idea of somebody who is building a rig because you want to go through the Rubicon one day and you want to go hang out in Death Valley the next. You're not just an overlander. There are lots of great overlanders out there. Guys going around in their Vanagons or in their Land Rovers, right? And they're overlanders. They like to camp out, find a place to go on a dirt road, a fire road someplace. Then there's the rock crawlers. And we're all rock crawlers, right? Most of you modern Jeepers out there are rock crawlers. We've started out as rock crawlers. We built our rigs to go up waterfalls, to go through the Rubicon, to go have fun. So they got larger tires, bigger axles, all that kind of stuff. Then there's the merging of the two. And the merging of the two is the RockLander, the guy who built his rig to go over the toughest terrain and yet still wants to go out and camp in the middle amongst the Joshua trees. Now, if you're going on the Death Valley adventure out there, that is the ultimate rock landing event because Corey has designed a trip, especially the first trip, that has some rock crawling tied into it, some places you need to go where you need to be a little more technical, a little bit more guidance needed, maybe even some spotting to get through with whatever you have, but then you're going to be out there camping in the middle of no place. So this is the ultimate RockLander event. So for us, we created the Ultimate RockLander Giveaway. This was spearheaded by our Adventure Rack Systems brand, ARS. You can go to ultimaterocklander.com and you can see the giveaway. It's free to enter. All you need to do is put in your email and then you answer a simple survey, quick survey, just to answer some questions for some of our partners, and we'll get it going for you. That's your entry. As we go along, like at the end of this month, there's going to be more ways to enter. So all those who have entered in February and started out the process will start learning more ways to get double entries, triple entries, all that kind of stuff. It's just a fun way of doing it. But we have a bunch of partners come together. If you notice, you go to the website, there's no actual logos or partners or who's there, but that's because we've been gathering them up and confirming them this month as we started it. We've got everybody from Warren on board with, of course, with the winch. Some of our great partners for Modern Jeeper, Raceline on board, Milestar on board. Now, one of the things about these partners is when you win, we're not just shipping you a pallet of a bunch of stuff and you're stuck with it. When you win, we will pass your information to each of these companies. And then you will be in contact with Milestar to figure out what tires you need. Exactly. Raceline, what wheels do you need for your build? Go out to Warren, what winch, right? And all these little different things. So every one of these partners is going to work with you to help you build your ultimate RockLander based on yours. Basically, you have and it's all designed for guys with JK, JL, or JT, really, because that's what ARS has stuff for. If somebody wins that doesn't have one of those, well, we'll make that work. But the reality is we built it because it's ARS wants to give you a rack. And ARS wants to give you a rack, and it's for your JL, JT, or for your JK. That's what the product line is right now. But of course, it includes Metal Cloak. It includes Jim and Deb at the DMOS Collective and their shovel system.
Yeah, we've got CMM is on board. Our friends over at Carolina Metal Masters are joining us. We'll have some tent folks. We may have some other overlanding companies. You just never know. Yeah,
it's going to be a whole thing. We called it a 20K giveaway. We're already almost there. I think it's going to be a 30K giveaway when it's all said and done. The amount of stuff coming up, rugged radios. I mean, we have so much coming together with all these great partners. So go out there, ultimaterocklander.com. As we enter, there will be ways of earning more, which has to do a lot with like sharing it out with your friends, getting out some things. There's some swag you might be able to buy and get some extra points for, right? So we're just going to have fun with this. The ultimate giveaway will be announced at a live Modern Jeeper event that we will be doing from Overland Expo West in Flagstaff, Arizona, which will be fun. I've never been up to that event. My dad used to live in Happy Jack, Arizona, which is just south of there. But that's when he was happy. Now he's in southern Arizona. He's not so happy or whatever. But Happy Jack, you can't help but be happy in a place like Happy Jack. And that's it. So we do the live giveaway. That's May 21st? 22nd. Yeah, 21st.
21st, I think.
Yeah. So we do a live giveaway then. So get your entries in, get it started now, learn more about how to do it. Ultimate RockLander.com. With that being said, we should probably introduce our guest.
We should do that.
We should, because the reason we brought our guest in was one, we're not going to talk about him because you just need to go listen to episode 8 when you want to learn about our guest. But he also was the voice of King of the Hammers. And I'd say the voice because while there are a lot of other voices to be heard, you just can't help but go, oh, hey, it's him. It's Ian Johnson. Ian, welcome to our show.
Hey,
Welcome, buddy.
happy to be here, guys.
Yeah, so here, this is your shop. This is cool.
This is like half the shop. So I'm on top of my little mezzanine shipping container that I dumped in the middle of the shop. I come up here whenever I just want. I got a desk up here in junk. It's the warmest part of the shop because all the heat rises.
And got your cup of coffee.
Yeah. So this side is half, and then over there is four-wheeler and the other half. So I'm right in the middle of my shop.
Because facing you is where all the production stuff is done. Because your office and stuff is in back of you, correct?
Yeah, the office and edit suites are like up front. We got 1,000 square feet. We got 2 full edit suites up there, and then all the well, it's not really an office. It's more like a clubhouse, really.
It's nice.
Yeah,
it's nice.
So it's up front, and then it's got all the edit suites are up there, and then the bourbon bar is up there, and all the fun, and then of course my video games are up there, and all that kind of jazz too. So that's where all that's up there, and then all the work happens back here.
That's awesome. So I'm jealous because Corey's been out there and seen it. And I haven't been able to go out that way, but that's what happens when you don't travel outside of your office. You don't get to see anything.
It happens. It happened to everyone in 2020. No one traveled, but luckily I had a fun sport to go to every day.
So you've been doing the four-wheeler because episode 8, you didn't have that going on, but you've been in four-wheeler now since 2018?
This is we just signed the deal for season 4. So this is season 4. So yeah, so 2022 will be season 4. So yeah, it'd be 18. Yeah, that was not planned in any way. That was just a happy accident that just sort of came out of nowhere. They just sort of showed up and they were like, hey, we want you to do a 4-wheel drive show again because we know your old show's about to be canceled. And so Motor Trend was big on getting a good 4-wheel drive show in. And so I agreed to it. And I said, let's try it out. And it's so much fun. The crew we work with a production company out of Florida called Brenton Productions. They're just a great crew to work with. Motor Trend's been a great network to work with. Much less drama than my old production company and my old network, which is good. So it's super nice. And I only have to do 10 episodes a year. So it's super, super low-key weight on my shoulders to do it.
Wow.
Well,
wow.
And timing was perfect because I remember you and I had a conversation a while back and you were very vocal about the trends in where the real televised stuff was going and people were getting rid of, regular TV channels and going to more of a streaming type of thing. And you were on top of it. You already saw those trends coming and this was a great opportunity, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Motor Trend set itself up right. They weren't, they have a TV channel. They're owned by Discovery. I mean, there's no secret there. They're part of the Discovery family of brands. And
conglomerate.
They were smart. They didn't just have a TV channel. They have a very popular streaming service that people subscribe to. And then they also still put their stuff on YouTube as well. And they put stuff through social media. So they know the game. They are a very forward thinking company. They always were, and especially when they partnered with Discovery, because Discovery's always kind of been like that. So yeah, it worked out really, really well and they still let me do my other stuff too. That was the most important thing. When I first sat down with them and talked about it, I said, I still want to do my other stuff. I still got all this other stuff that I do. And they were like, we don't care what you do. As long as you make us 10 episodes of four-wheeler a year, we're happy. And that's the best relationship to have, because that's not normally and that certainly isn't how it was with my previous network deal. And so to have that deal with this network, it's just so much nicer, so much better to work with.
And you handle all the production then here. You're doing the show, you're doing the editing, you're doing everything. You're putting together the package and submitting it over.
Not for four-wheeler. For four-wheeler, that's done by another company, but we use my shop. So that was kind of the icing on the cake. So we originally started talking and they were like, great, you just got to fly into this city and we'll shoot these shows. And you don't have to do any of the work. You can just show up and talk about the parts and we'll have a bunch of stunt.
That's not Ian.
When they made that offer to me, I said, wrong guy. That's not going to work. And they were like, what do you mean? And I said, no, building the cars is my favorite part. And so they said, okay, well then we'll rethink this. And so then they came back a few weeks later and they said, well, we're fine with that. We just don't know how we're gonna like plan it out. We don't know where we're gonna shoot this because they were looking at renting space in the city that we're going to and then building the studio. And I said, well, I own a studio. And they flew in and said, what do you mean you own a studio? And I was like, I own a studio in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. We just got done building it. So they flew in, checked it out. And the original plan was we built this side out to do all my big tire garage stuff. And it was already built. It was already dressed. It was done. And we started doing stuff for that. And the back, we're just leaving empty. We really weren't going to put anything back there. It's going to be storage for now. And then maybe do some other stuff back there in the future. And then when Motor Trend showed up and they were like, this is perfect. We want to rent this for 6 months out of the year. And I was like, uh-oh. So I guess we better fix it. Because when we signed the deal to do FourWheeler originally, they literally said, great, we'll be back in a month to shoot the first 3 episodes. And so I was like, uh-oh, I guess we better build a studio. So we quickly finished it, got a bunch of parts in, and it's been fun. It's been good. They're, like I said, it's a great production company to work with. And then the network is like super good, which is nice, which is really nice.
Well, it's kind of funny because if you look up Ian Johnson on IMDb, right? He does have a page. It has been updated. He doesn't take care of it. He doesn't have a publicist making sure that he's taking care of it. But it says like somewhere down there, it says Extreme 4x4, like 2001. That's it, just the title. But under FourWheeler, it has every episode listed.
Yeah, I think that's someone at Discovery taking care of that. That's not me, but yeah.
That's it. You got a team now. You got this team that actually cares about its talent.
Well, I think it's also just the fact that, I mean, you know, I've said it a bunch now. Discovery is, I mean, they understand the big picture of things, right? They understand that, hey, it's okay if I do other stuff. It's okay if I make videos and put them on YouTube, and if I do stuff like King of the Hammers. Like I could never do King of the Hammers before. That was like a lockdown. No way. I was a non-compete. My old production company would be like, no, you cannot go do that. Wow. And but with Discovery and Motor Trend, they're like, no, we want you to do stuff like that because we understand that more stuff you do like that, the more popular our shows will be because people will be looking for you and they'll see you here and they'll come over here. They understand that it's more of it's a big, as my old mentor, who's probably the smartest man in television ever, Joe St. Lawrence, used to say, a rising tide lifts all ships. And they firmly believe that. And that's important.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Speaking of KOH, so and that is this is like your fourth year doing.
Fourth year doing it.
Fourth year
doing KOH. Yep.
Yeah, just the change that's happened in 4 years.
Yeah.
We're talking about, and we were just talking about this on our previous episode, right? This and it's understanding that, I'm sorry guys, this isn't like amateur hour, come out and play. This is serious business now. This is a serious business. And if you're not there to be a part of that game and to play that role, you shouldn't be there.
Well, I mean, it's been fun to watch. I mean, the streaming side of things, you know, you can set up a camera and watch cars go by. That's great. But without you guys and the commentary, I mean, I realized a couple of years ago when we were out there. In fact, I think we were over by the shootout together, and knowing what you're talking about is so important. And I don't think people understand how fast things happen out there. And for you guys on the fly, it's like a color commentator on any sports network. You know, you've really got to know who you're talking to and who you're talking about. And it's entertaining now. It's an entertainment factor where you're not just staring at the video going, well, there goes another car. That's great.
Well, in other words, when I was doing commentating, where it was just like, yeah, that's what number is that? Oh, that's 46. 46. When they're out there racing, like, they have a really good time. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like a legit team that gets in there and does the work. And I'll say, probably one of the hardest working guys in that team is Miles Hasselquist, the official voice of Ultra 4, because he puts together. Because he's basically full-time, works for Ultra 4 full-time now. He used to have another job and did this part-time, but now he does it full-time. And hats off to him because he researches all the drivers. And I know the majority of the big drivers, but he will give us binders before the event. He sends them to us, and it has every driver, what vehicle, what car they're running, who built their chassis, who raced it before. He does all that homework for us. And without that, it'd be near impossible. But it's fun. I did it originally because I'd never done a live stream anything before, and so it was kind of fun just to go see what it was like. And then then after doing it, it's just every year we go back just because it is a ton of fun. And then it's also fun just to see the amount of work that goes into it. Until you're there to see how much work goes into it on the back end, it's like they spend 30 days on that lake bed between setup, the actual race, and teardown. And if you were to drive out of the Johnson Valley today, you'd never know that 100,000 people were there. Like they put it right back to how it looked when they showed up on the first day. The only thing that's discernible that something happened was the fire pit still there. That's
right.
Well, there's a lot less nails and burned out pallet boards out there too, because they clean all that up.
Yeah, they clean up. They sweep the whole course. They clean it up. They put up. Miles told me this year it was crazy. They put up, I think it was like 65 miles of fences.
Yeah.
Wow. Real? Oh my God.
Yeah. They leave with more trash than they create because they had like Tread Lightly was there this year, which was kind of cool. They had to clean up every day. And then they actually go out after the race and they will sweep the entire race course. They'll drive every lap and they'll pick up every piece of trash, every sign, every piece of caution tape, everything. It all gets picked
every
up.
bag of tools that bounces out of the race car because it wasn't properly strapped in.
Every spare tire that's laying out in the middle of the desert. They pick all that up and they take it all back and then they truck it all out and they grade the lake bed. They take the short course down, grade it all down. Because when they build Hammertown, they actually like dig, they trench, they bury cable. Like they bury power cables or they go in, like they build that whole town. They build it like you build a town. They actually dig trenches and lay cable in it, fill it up, and then put up all the tents and stuff. Anyway, they rip all that back out, take on all the repeaters. Yeah, it's a month. It's a month to put on that race, and it's a job.
And Dave, I think Dave just posted something like they just left. He just left the area day before yesterday or something.
Yeah. Miles just got home. Miles has been out there for 31 days. He went out there before to help set up. And then he texted me when he got home 2 days ago. He just got home. He was on the lake bed for 31 days for full setup and full takedown, which was crazy.
Well, and
how many of those days was he wearing flip-flops?
No, it was cold this year. We were here early a week early this year, so it was cold. It was cold this year. It was nasty out there.
Well,
I was not missing that.
Richie and Kristen Carter. Richie posted that they sold 200,000 wristbands at the main gate.
Yeah.
Shh. Dave only reported 50. Quiet.
No, he actually came out halfway through the week and said that they had made so much money off the gate this year that they took an extra $100,000 and added it to every winning check.
To the
payouts. Oh my gosh.
Checks. It looks like they screwed them up because there's
all of them were X'd out.
Yeah, so they put another $100,000 into every class win, every finish win.
So 200,000. What was the price for entry?
I can't remember. It depended on what you want, right? Because you had entry into the lake bed, you had entry into Hammertown. There's all these extras you can buy.
Yeah.
But I want to say $20.
Yeah, 25 probably, something like that.
$25, yeah.
200,000, 25. Wow. Like I said, This is big business, guys. This is no longer.
Well, there was also live bands every night, and we're not talking like there was a couple local bands, but we're talking Pennywise and Sublime. Like those aren't cheap bands. I mean, that's probably a $30,000 band to show up to play.
Well, especially to come play out there. Like hi, you're Sublime. We want you to come out and play in the middle of this lake bed.
Yep, middle of nowhere. Yeah, but I mean, Monster goes in, sets up that stage, and like it was like it's a legit rock concert, and that actually helps with the gate because we noticed it. The night that Pennywise played, there was a lot of locals just came in just for the concert.
Wow.
Because when else you can have a concert in Landers, California?
Right.
Probably not. So, yeah, they come in just for the concert. So
we're talking about that's $4 million at the gate.
Easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got all your sponsor money. You've got everyone who paid for a pit tent, everyone who paid for internet. I mean, like it's probably I do know for a fact. That's their money-making event. The series and stuff, they don't think they make any money yet. But they make all their money in 1 week or a month, a year.
Right. I know that last year, right? What was it? Last year he had to drop in 800,000 just on consultants just to make sure that they were, COVID ready. What was the restrictions out there for COVID this year?
There was none this year. There was none. Last year it was pretty serious. But this year, I think his saving grace is the fact that it's federal land, not state land. And so it kind of has different rules. I don't know what all the rules were, but they obviously there was no COVID restrictions at all, no COVID tests before we showed up like we had to do last year, and there was no mask mandate on the LakeBed, which is what we had last year. Although ironically, this year probably everyone was wearing a mask anyway because it was so cold. Oh, it was the worst dust ever. It was crazy.
It's one of those, you see the imagery of this, beautiful sunshine, and then everybody dressed to the nines and just like one layer over one layer over one layer with a hoodie and a thing, and it's like.
I think every morning we started below zero. Like when we showed up to the booth. When I showed up to the booth every morning, anything liquid in the booth was frozen because it froze.
Wow.
So let's talk about that for the cars, because I know that, even some years where it wasn't that cold. I remember going by and seeing like Larry McRae, they had, heaters pointed at their diffs and all these little things. So what does, at a professional level, what do these guys do when it's that cold in the morning to make sure their cars are going to be safe to run and to not waste a bunch of fuel just trying to sit there running the whole time?
It's mainly, like you said, the differentials. If you look at the oil that a lot of these guys use in the diff, it almost looks like molasses when it goes in. It's so thick, but you need it to basically be able to handle the abuse between the ring and the pinion. So that's like a lot thicker. And so you'll see guys, the car jacked up, just like moving in the morning, just basically rolling it. They do that also for a lot of the, if you have air lockers, not a lot of guys run them, to be honest with you. Most guys have gone full spool front and rear at this point, but there's still guys that run a selectable locker. And specifically, I found, at least with the ARBs, they're more prone to this. When they're cold, the case shrinks. And if someone gets in there when it's cold and fires that compressor and fires that locker right away, it blows the seals right out of the compressor manifold. So you'll see guys, especially if they're running ARBs, basically running up that diff, rolling it, just basically they'll have the car jacked up in the air, all four tires off the ground, and it's just turning. They'll just do that for probably about an hour before they go out and line up to start. And then the trickiest thing, though, is like you leave the line, it's below zero. By the time you're finished lap one, it's 65 degrees and sunny out. So that's the hardest part. You come in and you're sweating to death because you just got done racing. But yeah, so that's the hardest part about that race, because it's 10 hours. It's a 10-hour race if you're on it for yourself.
And what is it? So go ahead.
Oh, I was just, for you, Ian, do you still enjoy going out there? I mean, what's it like for you that when racing starts, and I mean, I know you're scheduled to be on at certain times, and then when you're not on, I mean, is it still fun for you to be out there, or you're like, oh man, I want to go home?
Dave doesn't pay me enough for me not to go out there if it wasn't fun. Okay, that's just the truth. So
right.
Yeah, for me, if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't go, because I mean, I do it because it's fun. I did it the first time because I thought it would be kind of neat to try, and then we had so much fun doing it. I was like, you know what, this is just a lot of fun, and it really is. Like I said, the team you work with out there is amazing. They have they're all most of them are ex-Red Bull videographer people, and it's pretty much everyone I know in the industry doing video out there as well. So it's a great team, even out in the field, and then all the drone guys, now the helicopter guys. But the live stream guys are certainly fun to work with. Miles is great to work with. Jim's fun to work with because I got to make fun of his British accent. We had Ben in there from Australia. The guy in charge of it all, Dan, he's Australian, and so he's got a good sense of humor. But yeah, if it wasn't fun, I wouldn't go, because it is work. I mean, we'll show up like normally a call time on a race day, and there's so many races now, right? There's 8 days of racing. So call time on a race day is you have to be prepped and ready to go at 7 a.m. and you're done when the last car's in. So someone's got to be available to be on mic so for everything up until the big race, that's usually 8 o'clock at night. So it's like an 11-hour day, 11-hour day. But like big race day, I mean, we were there until, I think we shut off at 11. So we went from 7 in the morning until 11 at night. So yeah, but it's still fun. I still like it.
Yeah, they get you out there in the morning, which I've done the morning shift, and that was like, it's dragging yourself out of bed, going to get that coffee, and it's good because you got them talking in your ear. And back in my day, Shannon was still part of the crew, so she's talking in your ear and giving you some information and feeding you stuff and making you feel good. But you still have to think. You still have to think and know what's going on. And
and you got to do your homework too before it. You got to know. And then the good thing is we kind of get a little sneaky peek of the race course a little bit before anyone else does. So we can then sort of figure out. I did not expect an IFS car to win this year. I absolutely did not expect it. But I did say that if it was going to be an IFS car, it'd be one of the Gomez cars, because Joe Thompson does such a good prep on all those UFO fab cars that it's just amazing. But and the Gomez guys, we call them Mexican RockBouncers, because that's how they drive. And,
Right.
And
hey, that's our no cowboys over there.
And they've been chasing that for so long. I was glad to see one of them finally win. So that was cool. But yeah, I was shocked to see an IFS car survive the whole course this year. My bet is, because of that, this year was 3 laps. My bet is next year Dave's gonna make it 4. It'll be like 320 miles next year. It's just gonna get longer. He's just
wow.
Yeah, I think
maybe add more desert into it, or
no more rocks.
another lap of rocks.
Yeah. I think there's that fine line, right, of like how much rocks is too much rocks. I think more rocks the better, because it's called King of the Hammers, not King of the Desert. So it's just managing the traffic is tricky. 3 years ago, we had a huge issue because on that third lap, I think it was the first time we did 2 rock laps. Yeah. Is, if you remember, like the leaders were coming around. I think they were supposed to go either up sledge or up claw. I can't remember.
Lap traffic.
20 cars just broke in the trail. And so they sent a dual sport rider, and they basically basically cut off 2 rock trails of the course, just because they knew it was going to be just a mess. And that's the hardest part, I think, is figuring out, like, where's the traffic going to be, and where can you, what do you go up, what do you go down, how do you figure all that out? That's honestly, I think, the hardest part.
Well, I think this year he did a really good job with starting everybody. I like the fact we headed to Turkey Claw first and get everybody some rocks. I think that becomes, it's another level of that challenge, instead of just going out and bombing through the desert for the first, 60 miles is kind of like,
Yeah, that was kind of, so lap 1, that big desert loop, that was always, when that first came in years ago, I think it came in like 2010, 2011. That was sort of like the weed out lap, right? Yeah. So like the theory was, if you can't go fast in the desert, you can't go fast in the rocks. And so they send everyone out this big, long, like desert loop with a rock, like Cougar Buttes, some type of rock trail way out there that you got to go run and then come back. And that'll basically get all your leaders up to the front, even if you started in the back, because like that was one year Shannon Campbell started 100th, and by the time he was finished lap 1, he was like 10th or something like that. So
right,
your guys will get up in front. That was always the theory behind it. I really liked this year that they completely changed it and dropped into Turkey Claw at mile 3. I thought that was cool. That's not a hard trail, but I think it was basically, I dug it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was neat. Like you said, get into the rocks as soon as you can.
Right.
So did you do commenting?
Commentary?
Did you talk on the microphone for pretty much all week, or just on because you were doing the EMC stuff, the time trials and all of that, but did you do the desert race too, the truck?
I did one of the desert races. I did the Sunday, because that's when I arrived Saturday night, and I did that, and that's fun because I'm like a Baja Bug guy from way back, so I used to watch like Score, and I used to watch the Mickey Thompson Stadium trucks and stuff. So the desert racing stuff I think is cool. And then the guy that's in the booth with you with that, his name is, I don't even know what his real name is. We just call him Fish. He's from Fish 6, which if you follow any desert racing, that's his YouTube thing. And he knows like everyone and everything about that sport. So it's cool to do that race with him, because he's just so knowledgeable about not only the vehicles, but the drivers themselves, because he basically does like a YouTube thing for every desert race every year around the country, and does it from his house, just basically following a live tracker and then getting feeds from his cell phone while people are doing it. So I did the desert race, and then we did qualifying, and there's like 4 days of qualifying now, or 3 days of qualifying, I guess, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Can-Am UTV race, Everyman Challenge, and then the big race. So yeah, I was on the mic for every single one of the races. I only missed one, which was the T1 race.
Well, I think they do a pretty good job of, because your guys are taking breaks, you're giving each other breaks, giving you a chance to rest in between, right?
Yeah, no, and I think, and it's funny, Jim, I tease Jim, because Jim is like, he's addicted to doing this, Jim Marsden.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I have to do power hour. I have to do the start. and I have to do the finish. And I'm like, hey, dude, I'm paid by day, not paid by word. So that's cool. You want to do all that? I'm good with that. So he's excited, and he wants to get in there, and like you almost have to pull him off the mic to give him a break. And so, yeah, this year we had Ben Napier take over in the production trailer, who used to race, and then he came out on mic occasionally. But what you didn't see was Ben was like behind the scenes in the production trailer doing a lot of the scheduling and stuff. And they spent a little bit more time this year sort of figuring out that flow, and they were like, because we had a lot of people this year. Last year, because a lot of people couldn't come, Jim couldn't make it because of COVID, and last year it was just me, Miles, and Ricky Johnson were pretty much the only people on mic. So we were on there all day, every day. This year we had more people, and so they wanted to spell everyone off at least every hour type of thing, which my voice appreciated because it was so much. It's a lot of talking, and then you get the hammer lung, which chews up your throat. So,
yeah, hammer lung.
We're taking a break for sure.
Well, and that's because you had Scott out there too, which I've done some work with, but the fun part about it, just when I was doing it, although it was kind of the not so fun, like I was the B team. Okay, let's be honest, guys. I was the B team. I started the things out. I came in here to do the fill. They kicked me out when it was about time for the winners to come in, so they could bring in, the A team does the winners, and then they bring you back in to do the cleanup after crew, right?
Yeah.
But it was fun to see you guys just all get a chance to interact and play, and really, it seemed like there was a lot of good knowledge there too, and everybody had fun doing it. You had a crew that just all enjoyed what they were doing, and the balance between the two, right? Because like when Scott, he's still a short course guy, he's been doing it for a long time, but he still doesn't really have the knowledge of all the racers and how it works that you do. So the two of you bounced off really well.
Yeah, it works out well. And I mean, we all have our specialty, right? So like Jim is, he races in the UK. So he races over there and he understands some of the cars. And then Miles is like the ultimate Ultra 4 super fan. Like he knows every racer's wife, what they had for dinner last night. Like he knows everything. Cam Hall and Tiffany Stone, they did pit reporting, and both of them do a great job. Tiffany is like a pit reporter in other forms of racing, so she brings that to the table, which is good. And then you've got Ricky Johnson, who obviously is Ricky Johnson. Everyone knows, if you don't know who Ricky Johnson is, you're not a fan of off-road anything. And then sort of I'm in there to like talk technical stuff, right? Because as much as Miles and Jim understand stuff, it's the question of, do they understand, why is an IFS car limited in the rocks versus a solid axle car? Why why is Lauren's new $500,000 Ultra 4 car, like why is it worth $500,000? Like it's absolutely insane, the technology behind it. And to understand that and to talk about that in a way where people who are listening would understand, you can't just say, yeah, it's got Fox live valving. Well, that you have to be able to explain why that's important. And that's sort of why I'm there, to talk about that type of stuff. So it's a good mix. It's been great.
And why it fails in the middle of the race.
Well, actually, the live valving didn't fail, and I think he broke that truck doing that drop-off that broke the internet during qualifying, because what sidelined the truck was something in the left rear broke. And if you go back and watch the drop video when he does that drop-off, he like drops off, front tires go off, and when he comes down, the left rear takes the whole load of the landing, and then he takes off. And unlike in previous years, like, the truth is, and I've said this 1,000 times, we say it during live stream all the time, the winner of King of the Hammers wins it in the garage, not on race day. And that's just the truth. So if you look at who, and we always say this, it's only 10 or 15 people actually running that race, which is also true. But if you go to their pits before the race, like they'll qualify, and they'll qualify fast because they want a good spot. But then if you go over to their pit tent, you walk in it, it's like that car is apart. It's getting all new third members. It's getting possibly new shocks, all new axles. If it has portals, it's getting new portal boxes. Like everything gets replaced. So when you leave the starting line, everything is brand new, best it can be that day when you leave the starting line. Because anything you've abused in qualifying, it's going to bite you on race day. And I think that's what happened to Lauren this time. I don't know yet. I haven't talked to him yet. But my bet is damaged it during qualifying. And that truck is so new, I'm going to guess they didn't do like that full typical Lauren Healy, let's replace everything for race day type of prep. And I think that's what took him out in the race. But that truck was so fast. I mean, it's amazing.
Well,
I don't think a lot of people. a lot of people don't understand that, just like what you just said, that it's not like those cars go out there and they run them all week long and then they go back to the pits and, fill them up with fuel and they go back out on the course. To be competitive, that's a whole nother level of commitment. And it's almost like they have spare cars. Things get swapped out, swapped parts, everything gets replaced and gone through. And people wonder, well, I've got these two mechanic buddies of mine and we go out to KOH and we're going to race. And then in the first 5 miles they break and they're done. And that's
Hey, stop talking about me.
Well, they break the cardinal rule, and I fell victim to it too when we raced in 2009, 2010. But if you're honest with yourself now, and if you watch who's competitive in that race, you watch them. They go out, they bring the car out. Half the time it comes out with no shocks, so it's all year it's being rebuilt. So new motor, new transmission, or at least a rebuilt. Like it gets taken apart. Motor gets torn down, put back together. Transmission gets sent off, gets gone through and put back together. Transfer case goes back to either Atlas or Trailworthy or whoever's you're running. They completely rebuild it, send it back to you. All new third members, all new gears, all new everything. You usually carry 2 sets of those because you can swap them. But they'll show up in LakeBed. Half of them show up without any shocks on the car because the shocks are back at their shock manufacturer getting rebuilt. And then they deliver them to the LakeBed. They bolt them on the car. They shock tune that. And then that car doesn't move until qualifying. That car sits. They don't pre-run in it. They don't go out and play in it. They don't go out and, at night and run Chocolate Thunder or backdoor to see if you can have some fun.
You're marking like everything I did wrong in our second year out there.
So did I. I did the same thing. We took the car out. And we're like, we got to see how this car's like. And we did the same thing. And that's what bit us because when we got out race day, we broke something. And that's if you watch those guys, because that's what a professional race driver does, right? It's not that car is not a toy. That car is a tool. They have other things. You'll see them. They'll go. Half of them won't even run the rock trails. Some of them will on a new one. They'll go out and run it to pick some lines and stuff. But if they do, that car gets rebuilt. Like it doesn't go pre-run and have fun and then come back and just sit. It gets completely redone and then ready to go out again because that's an abusive race, and it does. If there's a weak link in your car, it's going to find it. And so you have to have the best car on the starting line to finish that race.
Well, you see John Curry would go out there when I was shock tuning, and Curry came out, and he'd come out for the day. They had their little buggies, and they would go run, backdoor or Chocolate Thunder, and they just go run all day. They're just running those trails. Yeah. They're not taking the race car out there, right? They're just going to get familiar with the trail and see how it's changed and see how it's getting ready for race day. But you're right, they're not taking the race car out there. When I had mine,
there's no point because the only time people recreate around there is at night because the race course is closed all day. So there's no point in pre-running Chocolate Thunder because it's going to be completely different tomorrow morning.
Right.
That's just the reality of it. So there's no point even trying to figure it out because it's just going to be a completely different race course. So it's best just to go and walk the trail. You'll see them go out and they'll walk the trail and check things out, and then that's it. Then they're done, type of thing. So yeah, it's a hard race, no joke. It's not for mess. It's not for the weak. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for the light of pocketbook. It used to be like, oh, I'll go race this race. If you don't have $100,000, you'll finish, but you're not gonna top 10 finish. Like you got to have $100,000 worth of just loose money to figure it out, and then that'll get you to the race with a car, and then you got to figure out pit support and fuel and friends and it's awesome. It's awesome, but it's like Score was in the 70s. In the 70s, Score was like full of guys with like Myers-Manx dune buggies and VW bugs just out ripping up and down, going down to La Paz, used to leave Ensenada with a telegraph, and then you'd race to La Paz and collect your telegraph, and that was your time, right? And that was what you did back then. But then now that's all changed. When Parnelli Jones showed up, it changed because when money shows up, everything changes, and that's just what's happened to King of the Hammers. And it's like a NASCAR or a Score. It's like a big race series. It just all happens on one day.
So even in a couple of the meetings that Dave had brought in some of the F1 guys and talking about EV technology, were you privy to some of that? Were you there for some of those conversations? And I'm just curious what you think of EV and where that's headed.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of EV, and everyone hates me for it. I am biased They're starting an EV class, right? It's a spec EV class. Personally, I would not accept that EV package if it was given to me because I don't think that's the winning package. I think it's an interesting package, and I think Dave did the right thing, right? Like he has an EV class, and one guy showed up, and one guy's only going to show up until something changes. So what he did is he basically gave away 10 $50,000 EV packages. So that includes an electric motor, BMS, which is your battery management system, a bunch of batteries, which I can't tell by looking at them, but they look like they might be Cascadia Motion mini blocks, or they could be repackaged Tesla cells, and then an AEM control unit for it. So he's giving you that to build, and then people are going to show up next year with a car ready to race. But without doing that, I don't think that class would grow at King of the Hammers because I think people just don't believe in it in that environment. But I think I'm a huge fan of EV. I think it's anyone who's ever driven an electric vehicle or sees the potential of it, and especially right now when you see how much the aftermarket is like doubling down on EV technology, in 5 years it's going to be a completely different game. So I think it's super cool. I think it's neat that they're doing it. But like I said, it's there's some limitations to the package that they've chose that I wouldn't have gone with. I would have gone with something else. But that's just me.
So how do you build a car for EV though? Is it because you look at the Gomez brothers? They build a car that basically is as bulletproof as it can be, as much horsepower as can be, because it's designed around their driving style. But it would seem with EV, you have to think a lot more about weight. You have to think a lot more about parts than you would when you're throwing a gas motor in.
The only limiting factor to EV right now is our batteries. So I have 2 EV builds. Probably only one will get done this year. The next one will probably be pushed to 2023. But I have a Tesla. You can't see it. It's over there. I have a Tesla LDU here. That stands for Large Drive Unit. That's what's in the back of the Teslas. And then I have Tech Consulting, who designs all the Brenthal trophy trucks and all the Tisco trophy trucks. They're designing me a chassis, and I'm doing a long travel VW thing with a Tesla LDU in the back.
Wow.
On 35s. So it'll basically be like a full, legit, like fun streetcar, sandcar kind of shenanigans. But instead of a LS1 into a Mendiola or a Fortin, it's going to have a Tesla drive unit in the back. Now, the reason I'm doing that is 100% selfish on my part because A, I want to do some EV stuff, but B, so when I started having them design the chassis, the plan was completely to do like LS1 into a Mendiola. But then I priced the transaxle. I don't know if you ever bought a Mendiola or a Fortin. They're super expensive. I mean, you're talking about a $20,000 transaxle. And, 15 to 20 grand on a transaxle that has to be rebuilt every year. Can't drive on the street, and it's a race. And if you want to get into reverse, you have to go from if you're in third, you want to get in reverse, you have to stop the car and it's like a sequential gated thing, right? So you have to go third, second, or third type of thing. So it's not really that friendly to the street. A Tesla drive unit, which is the equivalent of 600 horsepower to the rear wheels, comes with its own transaxle built into it. You can buy that for $3 grand. So for $3 grand, I get a motor and a transaxle.
Wow.
And then I'm ready to go. The only thing that kills me is the batteries, which are expensive. But the battery technology from 2 years ago to today is completely different story.
Well, the F1 guys, they were talking about, essentially having, it's kind of like the USB versus USB-C cables. But if you have a standardized pack that can be swapped in and swapped out in whatever kind of a case, but weight becomes an issue. And technology wise, it's changing so fast that.
Yeah. What I tell people is if you look at EFI when it came out in 85, it sucked, right? Everyone thought it was garbage, right? Nobody wanted electronic fuel injection. Holly came out with this goofy projection thing that kind of worked. And but everyone I was at the dealer when the C3 carburetor, that was computer controlled carburetor. Oh, it's terrible. But I was working at a GM dealer, and that computer controlled carburetor, which was the first version of electronic fuel injection, it came out, and we were literally taking those carburetors off and putting Quadrajet carburetors back on the cars because it didn't run right. It was just a bad design. And that, if you look at that then, and then you fast forward to like 2004 when the LS came out, like nobody would say, oh, I don't want my LS1. I want a 350 small block. Nobody would say that, right? The technology that has gone in that length of time is like nobody would want to go back to that 350 with a quadrajet. And if they do, they're insane. All that time frame in EV has happened in like 2 years.
Yeah.
So give it 5 more years and it'll be absolutely crazy. And people argue about the environmentalness of it, and I'm not here to argue the environmentalness of electric vehicles, I should say, because I don't believe that they're any better for the environment than a regular gas burning car. Just like I don't believe the diesel engine that I have to put a cardboard box of horse urine in the exhaust is better for the environment than one without it for some reason, because someone's got to drive those boxes all around the country and then I got to throw them in the landfill. But to me, the beauty of America is that this country's big enough that we could be energy independent with more EVs than we will with, I don't think we'll ever be energy independent with gas cars or fossil fuel cars, but there is the ability to be energy independent if you look at electric vehicles and hydrogen powered vehicles side by side. I think if you look at those two technologies, and to me, that's more important as a nation than environment. Let's be honest. I'm a good steward of the environment, but if I was an environmentalist, I would not take cars apart, make them worse on fuel, and drive over rocks with them. I would just go drive, and that's just the truth.
Well, I think, and technology-wise, it's been so interesting to watch. I mean, when people in the industry, and even Stellantis hasn't said this out loud, but the 4xe, they recommend people should be out there leasing that vehicle so that you have it 2 years, maybe 3. You're going to want to trade it in because the technology is going to be extremely different in 2 or 3 years. So to invest in it now,
it's going to completely change. Yeah. And then I think if you do any research on hydrogen, which will also blow your mind, and some of the stuff that's happening in hydrogen, I think hydrogen is also a solution that is like freaking crazy. I was at Arrington Performance, not to divert this topic off something else, but why not? We can do that on your podcast.
That's what we're all about.
Absolutely. So I was at a meeting at Arrington Performance, and he has an LS1 on a dyno running on gasoline. And it's a 600 horsepower LS1. And then he has an intake manifold that you basically take the intake manifold off and you bolt his intake manifold on. It has 16 injectors. It has 2 fuel lines, and it has a fuel tank, not a fuel cell, full of hydrogen. And it makes the same 600 horsepower. And the only emissions it has is water out of the tailpipe.
water.
And I didn't know this. And I asked him this. I said, pardon my ignorance, where do we get hydrogen? Like, I don't know. And it's basically pulled from the atmosphere. It's a chemical process, an electric process. But he pointed out, and I didn't know this either, in California, there's like 500 hydrogen stations. Most of them are used by like municipalities and buses and all that kind of stuff. Half of those fuel stations make the hydrogen on site. So they have a hydrogen generator in the parking lot, and then those buses come in, they just fill it up. So that's another example of energy independence. If you can make hydrogen and you can put it into an internal combustion engine and have good emissions. The reality is, I think it was somebody, I can't remember if it was Toyota. No, it wasn't Toyota. It was like Honda or somebody, CEO. They asked him, they said, why aren't you going deep into electric cars? And like GM is. And his response was, our battle is not with gasoline. Our battle is with tailpipe emissions. And if we can make a zero emissions vehicle, it doesn't have to be an electric vehicle. As long as we get to a zero emissions, that's all we have to do. And so they were going deep into hydrogen as well, which I think the two of them, those two technologies side by side, I think are what we're going to be looking at in 5-10 years. That'll be all we're doing.
Well, there's a research center that our podcast listeners have heard me talk about this. There's a research center right here in Sacramento, right outside of Sacramento, that's been there for 20 plus years. And it was a partnership between Toyota, GM, Nissan, several companies all built this research center for hydrogen. So hydrogen was what the push for hydrogen has been there longer than the push for EV. It's just that a guy named Elon Musk came out and made EV more practical. Now the challenge, though, you talk about that's right, and cool and good looking. the challenge again, let's get a little political here. The energy independence is great, but the dependence, and Corey has brought this up before, the problem is getting the lithium for the batteries, right? And most of that we're now depending upon other countries to mine, because of course we can't really do that here. So the hydrogen, I believe, is in the long run better for energy independence, especially because you can simply generate it right there. And the more they do, the cost goes down. The flip side of it, everybody still thinks of the Hindenburg and thinks, well, that's going to be the end of, the danger of the Hindenburg is the danger of hydrogen, right?
The danger of the Hindenburg is the fact that it was aluminum coated canvas. It had nothing to do with that. The actual thing that burned was not the hydrogen. Hydrogen is like propane. If you've ever gone all redneck and shot a propane cylinder to try to make it explode like it does in the movies, it won't do it. It's impossible. It's like diesel fuel versus gasoline, right? The mixture of oxygen and hydrogen, or oxygen and propane, and oxygen and natural gas has to be so perfect for an explosion to happen that the chances of a hydrogen car exploding or burning is slim to none. There's a greater chance the hydrogen's going to just evaporate back in the atmosphere. It's the second lightest element on the planet. It has,
wow.
If you I learned this at that Arrington Forms thing, is it has a weight, atomic weight of 2, and the only reason, and 1 would be the lightest, and the only reason it's not number 1 is they left number 1 blank in case they find something lighter than hydrogen. So if you ever have a split, let's say you have a spill of your hydrogen tank, because it is a pressurized cylinder, it's 5,000 psi. You have a pressure, it's just going to evaporate. It's going to dissipate into the atmosphere. It's going to immediately disappear and be up in the sub-atmosphere of our planet. It's not going to be like gasoline spilling on the ground that you can light on fire.
Well, it sounds like you're going to have to build a hydrogen race car.
Well, I have the reason I was at Arrington, as we were talking about, he is working hand in hand with SEMA, with the federal government, with a bunch of state governments in California. He wants to. Did you see the EV display at SEMA this year, where all the EV cars were there?
Yep.
So he's hoping that not this SEMA, but next SEMA. So SEMA 2023, his plan is to have a host of cars there that'll all be hydrogen powered. He wants to have his systems and he's working on getting his system approved as oh, you got an LS1? No problem. Take your intake off, drop this intake on, put this kit in, and now you have a zero emissions vehicle. And
wow.
Getting that approved by CARB and the EPA and all this kind of stuff. And but that's Matt said. That's a whole other pile of politics you got to dig yourself through, because half of that has nothing to do with whether it works or not. It's just a whole bunch of politicians making a decision for you. So
right, it might just save the Hemi. And this whole idea that Dodge, well, we're just going to drop the Hemi. We're not going to have the Hemi anymore. You're just going to do something else. And we could talk about this. Corey was talking about a little bit earlier, but the straight 6 coming back, right? Mm-hmm. But if we can save the Hemi, if we can save American muscle, really, by having a hydrogen powered, who wouldn't do that?
Our problem. Go ahead.
I think it'll definitely save motorsports for sure.
And I think that's our challenge is all up here. Russ, I've been kind of on my little podium for the last year talking about it, and it's coming, and the manufacturers are telling everybody it's coming, but I get the impression from all the enthusiasts and all the motorsports people, and they're just like, well, it's not coming to me. I'll do what I want. Well, guess what? That's you can't. You're not going to be able to do that. So we either need to get behind something, but it's all up here. It's all about, we think we have these freedoms to do what we want, but that's not.
I think the hardest thing, and I think it's something that I would have hoped that people from that would have learned during COVID, but not a lot of people didn't, is that issues in our society are not a black and white thing, and people think they are. It's like the reason there's no one showing up to work is because the government's paying them to stay home. Well, that's not true, because if you actually look at how much the government's paying people, I'm sorry, I spend that by lunch on Monday, so that's not going to be to stay home. So that's not the reality. There's other things at play, and there's greater things at play. And if you look at hydrogen versus gasoline versus all this kind of stuff, there are so many players in that game that you have no control over as a citizen, because it's you're dealing with OPEC, you're dealing with international trade treaties. Most people don't realize that most of the oil in this country doesn't even come from the Middle East. It comes from Canada. It gets dragged out of the ground in Alberta and the tar sands, which is some of the worst oil. And people complain about lithium. If you've ever been to the tar sands, that's like, it looks like it's just a nightmare of environmentalism. But it's basically oil mixed with sand, and they drag it out. It's on the ground. They scoop it up and they burn the sand off and they get the oil out. That's where the majority of the oil in this country comes from for gasoline. And, you know, there's all these arguments about all this stuff, but there's all these things are not a simple like yes or no. There's like 1,000 things involved in all of this. And you need to kind of look at the big picture and maybe relax your mind a little bit and just sort of say, okay, maybe that's happening not because of the price of gas or the price of this. Maybe there's another reason at play here. And then you can kind of wrap your head around a little bit. But that's hard to do. It's hard to sort of like open up your mind to see that it's just like turning the economy off and turning the economy on. It's real easy to turn the economy off, but it's real hard to turn it back on. And I think they're learning that as well.
Well, you know, speaking of black and white, so, you know, you have you being are you still a Canadian citizen?
I'm like half.
Yeah. You're half? Yeah. So, I mean, up there, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on. You have to have some opinions about what dear Trudeau has been doing lately.
Yeah, I feel bad for my Canadian friends because I think that, I mean, we deal with it all the time because we have family up there. They've been in like super lockdown for so long that you can't expect anybody to stay locked down like that for so long and not lash out. And hey, I'm a huge fan of protesting. I think, you know, everyone who gets angry about protests needs to remember that this country that we're sitting in was founded by a bunch of rich white guys who didn't want to pay their taxes. So they protested, and that's how America was born. And so you have to remember that. And so protesting can be a good thing. But I think that it's just time at this point that we're kind of I think the whole world needs to realize dealing with all this coronavirus stuff. I think we need to realize now, it's not going away. I think it's here to stay. If you look at countries that had like crazy lockdowns like Canada and Australia, it didn't stop it. It's still there. So I think it's time just as a society to say, you know what, it's time just to deal with this and move on and kind of just sort of look at this as more of like, this is our new normal and we have to live with it type of thing. And so I think that's kind of what they're facing up there. And so I think there's a lot of people who are angry, and I get why they're angry. We have friends that live up there and they're angry and they're just tired of being locked down. And I think you can't keep a society locked down for forever. You got to let them out. It's just not going to work.
Well, and protesting is, as you said, it is the root of democracy, right? It's the ability to protest.
Yes, 100%. People don't realize this. Like and America's got some great examples of where in other countries things would never have happened because they didn't have the freedoms that America has. Like if you look at Europe, a lot of European countries, you would not have the civil rights movement that America had because in some European countries, a civil rights movement is illegal because of hate speech, and any hate speech is illegal. And so even if you're speaking out for what you is the right reason, which is obviously oppression of a certain ethnicity, that is in some countries that never would have happened because it was illegal. But because America has, and most of our Western countries have these freedoms, you have to basically understand that, wow, that's a big deal. I guess that's a good thing that people can do that. And so I think you should just let them do it, let them say their piece and work through it. I'm not a fan of like shutting down the Ambassador Bridge because being from that area in Canada, I know how important that bridge is for everybody. I mean, for both people in Canada and the United States, that's a huge trade corridor. So, but I think peaceful protests, friendly, I think that there's nothing wrong with that. That's an important thing.
Well, that's a big difference, and I'll get a little political here, but the big difference between what we saw in 2020 with protests across American cities that are still recovering from that and the protests happening today in Canada, they may be causing interruptions to commerce and interruptions to a flow, which we see internationally all the time. France is notorious for that, right? The farmers come out with their tractors and block off trade routes all the time because that's what they can do to make their voices heard, versus burning down cities or post offices or churches. And that's not protesting. That's that fine line between, hey, I'm happy to walk down the street and make my voices heard, and causing a riot and causing damage. When you're doing that, there's laws against it. But when I haven't seen that, and just from what I've seen, and I don't sit there watching the news every day, but I haven't seen that kind of action up in Canada. So the fact,
they would feel so bad about doing that. They don't do. There's never been a. There's never. I don't think there's a word for looting in the Canadian language. I think no, and I don't see that at all. I don't, and I think that there's a lot at play. Like we said before, there's 1,000 things at play there, and I think that there's a lot of stuff that's like, it's just there's everyone says there's 3 sides to every story, right? There's one side, the other side, and then the truth is somewhere in the middle, kind of thing. And I think that's what they're dealing with. And I think I think you've got a lot of people who are fed up, and I get it. I mean, we have friends up there and they're fed up. We haven't seen our family since December of 2019 because they haven't been able to travel. So that if you've lived in that situation, we as Americans kind of forget how great the amount of freedoms we have because we take them for granted a lot. But I mean, we have friends up there who haven't been able to leave the country in 2.5 years. So that's you keep people like that for 2.5 years, it's going to boil over. Even if it's a super friendly society like that.
I mean, it just comes down to is how you handle it, right? It's like anything. I can have a problem with a product here at Metal Cloak that all of a sudden a dozen of them get welded wrong or whatever and goes out there, and we can either say, hey, screw you guys, or we can take care of it and handle it, right? And we have the ultimate goal is at the end of the day, everybody's doing better. How governments handle things determines, right? We can all have different political opinions, but how governments handle the people when the people are upset makes a huge difference in the future of that country, the happiness of the people, and whether or not Trudeau's doing the right thing. Now, I choose to believe the other conspiracy, which is if you take a picture of Trudeau and you put him next to a picture of Castro, they look very, very similar. And that's what I choose to believe.
I like that rabbit hole down there. Yeah, that's a good one for sure. Yeah.
Well, man, so back to King of the Hammers. That was a full week of just fun. And I mean, obviously, it's your lifeblood. You love that, and you wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you didn't. Anything that really stood out from you during the week?
Man, I would probably say the thing that stood out most for me was just the number of people that were there. I mean, it was way bigger than, and I know it's hard to judge because of last year, and there was a lot of drama about having to get a COVID test to get on the LakeBed, and I think that a lot of people didn't come out for that reason. I think people have kind of like pushed past that now, and they just kind of realize that this is kind of like our new life, and they just understand that. And so I think that's kind of, people are more accepting of just having to jump through a few hoops to do some stuff. But I would say, man, the number of people, that was probably the biggest thing. And then I would say the number one thing I would take from this King of the Hammers is that Jason Scherer is probably the greatest ambassador for off-road racing of any racer on the planet. And it all boils down to one moment in that race, and that was they were coming through, I believe it was Outer Limits, and Jason was ahead of Gomez. And I just say Gomez because there's so many of them, I get them mixed up. I'm gonna
just say GBR.
I think it was Raul. I can't remember, but anyway. So he was behind him, and Jason flopped his car. He got in this goofy line and put his car on the side. And he jumps out to hook the winch line up. All he had to do was hook a winch line up. Car sitting on the side. Just has to pull a winch line like over here, and then just little tug of the winch, and the car would like bloop, flop back over. And as he's running across the trail to the rock where the recovery point was to hook his winch line on, Gomez comes around the corner. Now, the rules for Ultra 4 are very clear, and it's a safety thing. If Jason had hooked that line, Gomez would not be allowed to proceed down the course, or he would have incurred like a huge time penalty for driving over Jason's winch line, because that's like a huge no-no, right? And Jason was about to hook the hook, and we got it on the live stream, which was amazing. Jason was about to hook the hook, and right before he hooks it, you see Gomez come around the corner, and you saw Jason unhook the hook, pull his winch line back across, and wave Gomez through. and that cost him the race, and he couldn't get around him after that. And that was probably the best I've ever seen, like, sportsmanship in our sport. Like, that was just, and that's just Jason being Jason. I've known Jason for years. That's how he is. Like, he knew everything went through his head right there. I can hook this hook, still lead this race, shut him down, get ahead of him in this rock trail, and never pass me in the desert. Because he admitted later he forgot to change the gears in the car. They had different third members for the qualifying. So he was capped at 90 miles an hour in the desert, and Jason could do 130. So, because they messed up and forgot to swap out the third members after qualifying. And, but Jason could have sealed that win right there, and instead he unhooked and let Gomez drive by. So that was probably my most memorable thing for King of the Hammers this year.
That's incredible. And everybody you can listen to Jason talk about what it's like to do King of the Hammers on episode number 4. Again, all of our best people were in the first 10, 20
what
episodes.
What number is this?
This is episode 153.
God, so many.
Yeah. Every week, no matter what.
Well,
somehow we managed to do it.
The hardest thing, is it was really hard. I've been going out there for, I don't know, 8 years or something like that. And to not go this year and have the live feed instead, I have mixed feelings about it. It's hard not to be out there and see everybody and be a part of it. And typically we go out there as media and get to talk to people. And even as cold and as miserable as Hammertown can be, there's still something that draws people in. And the other thought I had was of Levi Shirley, who, had some car problems out in the pit and pulled his car in, knew he was pretty much done. The tranny was toast, and then hopped out of his car and was helping other people in their pits. I mean, it's that kind of, I don't know, character.
You hear those stories. You hear those stories all the time. It used to happen at Stampede. It's like somebody would blow out an engine or a transmission, and everybody's working through the night to help them because we want to have competitors on the lake bed. It's a little different than like, well, if he doesn't race tomorrow, then it's better for me. And Ian, you're more familiar with the sports car and the hot rod world, and that's kind of it. Hey, if you can't drag, you can't drag. But in off-road racing, we want people to race.
Some of them have it in some of the rule books for some of the, like, and people don't realize this, but if you watch that Days of Thunder, and remember that when Cole didn't have his engine, they swapped the engine right before the race.
Right.
They had to push it to start, and the other pit crew came over the wall to push. Like, that's actually illegal. And that's why you hear the guy who plays the other crew chief or the team owner.
Yeah, that's said, my engine.
My engine in that car. My guys are pushing my engine.
Right.
It is. There's a lot of racing where you're not allowed to help out the other team. It's like illegal in the rule book for that, and it's there to prevent like teams teaming up. And I get it. Like when you're doing that type of stuff, you can have teams team up and basically lock down a whole race course. But no, you're right. In off-road racing, all off-road racing, and especially Ultra 4, it is very much we're all here to help. Let's help each other out. And like Corey was saying, you see it every year. When someone's out of the race, last year we saw it with Terry Madden. When he was out of the race, he stayed out there for like 3 hours pulling winch line for people. Cameron Steele, when they broke on King's Veto last year, they basically stayed out there and kept helping out people. So it happens everywhere, every year. And I mean, I think it is true. It's like the off-road lifestyle that everyone's involved in.
Yeah, sure. It's a big family.
Yeah, and we see that every day as Modern Jeepers, and that's why when Jason Scherer, I mean, he is the essence of a Modern Jeeper. We're out there to help people when we go off-roading. It doesn't matter who we are. It doesn't matter. It might be one of my competitors sitting there on the side broke, and I'm going out and going to help him because that's what we do. But that's that great Modern Jeeper lifestyle. Well, this has been fantastic, Ian. Really appreciate you being a part of this and giving us kind of a recap of KOH. I'm sure people will have lots of questions. If you have questions, how can they reach out to you, Ian?
Always reach out to me through social. That's always the easiest way. So it's more Instagram than Facebook. I'm not on Facebook as much as I should be, but probably Instagram's the easiest way. Just jump out through there and send me a message, and I'm always trying to answer whatever I can. I get lots of tech questions through there too, and so I try to feed out and help anybody I can in there as well.
Well, we'll link that out there. But is that what Big Tire Garage on Instagram?
Ian from Big Tire Garage. Yep, that's the one.
And then, of course, you know how to reach out to me, Matson@metalcloak.com and Corey@metalcloak.com. And, of course, Jessy at metalcloak.com, even though Jessy isn't here. Shame, missed her. So I'm sure she had a lot of great questions for you. That being said, now, I don't know if there's anything else you want to wrap up with, Corey?
Dude, I'm super thankful that Ian was able to join us. It brings back the early that were technical, and you get somebody with Ian's personality on here, and it just makes me smile. So hopefully our listeners will feel the same way.
Yeah, what we need to do is we need to bring Ian's tech tips back. Like you used to do the whole tech tip thing in Crawl magazine, and maybe what we'll do what if we work with Ian, get a bunch of little tech tip just recorded, and we'll just drop one in every episode, right?
No, you need to do one of these live, and we'll do live Q&A type stuff. I've done that before, and that actually works pretty good.
That'd be fun.
Got to find the time when a lot of people are online, but yeah, you can do the live Q&A is always fun.
Well, we could do. Well, most people are on live 1 a.m., right?
That's the problem.
That's a problem. Yeah. So we'll get in there. I'll make it an excuse. We'll fly out there, and we'll just have to set it up in your place and do a live.
We could
Q&A.
do that. Yeah, we have the ability to go super live over here. So yeah, we could do that, and then we could do. We could include some bourbon then as well. Yeah.
Nice. There you go. I like it. All right, my friends.
I got a shout out to Crawl again. If you guys don't have a subscription, use Modern Jeeper and get a discount. There's a great story that John did in here about the Death Valley Modern Jeeper adventure. So.
Right. And are there any spots available yet still for Death Valley?
I think we have 2 on the first trip. And then we have, I think, 3 on the second trip. So we're going to have to shut down. Interested in getting out there.
Well, we got to get Ian out on one of these trips, and not as a guide, because every time I see him out there doing a trip, he has to work. I want you to just come out, hair down, baseball cap on, and just enjoy yourself for a couple of days without being,
These would be the trips for that, for sure. People wouldn't want to walk around with him and let him give him some peace.
Yeah.
I'd have to get my what did you call it? RockLander.
RockLander.
RockLander. Yeah, I'd have to figure out what Jeep to bring, and then we'd go from there.
Yeah, I'd say you'd be a passenger, but then it'd be I don't think you're a passenger. You like to drive.
I do prefer to drive, 100%. Always have, always will. Yep.
I think you could take the shop truck out. Just throw a rack on the back, and you can modify the ARS bed rack system. There we go.
I wouldn't even put a rack on the back, because to quote Harry Wagner, overlanders are just lazy backpackers. I would go full Ultimate Adventure style. We put a tent in the back and call it a day. That's all.
There you go.
Nice. Yep. Throw a tent cot.
Couple noodles. As I saw on one of those world famous overland YouTube channels, they said, they fully admitted it. They said overlanding is actually the most expensive way to cook a meal, because all the overlanding videos on the internet they always drive somewhere, and then they're like, "What's for dinner?" And now it's tacos. It's tacos. It's so it's the most expensive way to cook a meal is overlanding. Yeah.
Well, I think Becker would agree with you, because he takes a generator and a microwave when he goes out.
Right.
Generator and a microwave.
When we were in West Virginia with Senator Mark Maynard, he had he just threw a regular, a bed mattress, a twin mattress, in the back of his I think he had a Blazer, and put an easy up over the back of the. That worked.
I just got done finishing out my Toyota into my car camping project, and I just bought one of those $60 inflatable truck bed mattresses.
There you go.
Inflated in the back, and I got the little soft top bed topper there, and life's good, man. That's all you need. As long as I can make coffee, that's all I need in my life. If I can make coffee, I can live off coffee and Cliff Bars for a good 7 days if I had to.
Yeah, here.
I'm stopping at gas stations, right? I can get some roller food and stuff. I'll be okay. That's all right.
Awesome. All right. Well, you're always got an open invitation to come join us on a Modern Jeeper adventure, and we promise to not make you work. All right. Well, hey, Modern Jeepers, thanks again for joining us. As I said, you reach out to us, ModernJeeper.com, ModernJeeperForum.com, ModernJeeperAdventures.com, ModernJeeperShow.com, MetalCloak.com, AdventureAccessors.com, UltimateRockLander.com. And if you don't have all those, just check us out on the show links, and we will share all this with you and more. Reach out to Ian if you have questions. Don't bother him if you don't, because, he is a busy guy. But he loves everybody because he's Canadian. That being said, we'll see you on the trails.
Cheers.